On this edition of Native Report, we travel to the Mille Band of Ojibwe for the State of the Band address.
And to protect our way of life.
We interview visionary Lance Morgan of Ho-Chunk Inc.
I've been very involved in my dad's small business.
And we learn about how the Department of Justice has clarified its policy on enforcing federal wildlife laws for eagle feathers. We also learn something new about Indian country and hear from our elders on this Native Report.
Production of Native Report is made possible by grants from the Shakopee-Mdewakanton Sioux Community, the Mille Band of Ojibwe, and the Blandin Foundation.
We're proud of our young people when they graduate.
Hi, welcome to Native Report. I'm Stacy Thunder. Nearly 3 decades ago, the Mille Band of Ojibwe held its first State of the Band address. Continuing that tradition is Chief Executive Melanie Benjamin. While 30 years ago it was an intimate function, today it's a speech of statewide importance.
On this January morning in the Grand Ballroom of Grand Casino Mille Lacs, the Color Guard presents the flags for the State of the Band address by Chief Executive Melanie Benjamin. The address is a governmental function by the Mille Band of Ojibwe.
We talk about tribes and how they govern themselves. A lot of people don't even know tribes exist anymore. They're coming from a generation that tribes really weren't functioning governments. They may live on an Indian reservation and controlled by the government. But a lot of people are starting to find out that tribes do govern themselves. The tribal government is designed as a separation of powers, and we have an executive branch and a legislative branch and a judicial branch of government. Most working functions in our day are between the executive and legislative branch of government. The executive branch of government runs the programs, your health and human services, your community development, your education, natural resources. Then your legislative branch is on the approval ends of what actions they need to take to make them programs successful. My role is, of course, the Secretary-Treasurer, which means I'm also the Speaker of the Assembly on the legislative branch that I explained about. There's another role to that as the Treasurer, where your duties are fiscal responsibilities entrusted in keeping track of the band's revenue. With that, we work together with the Chief Executive's office.
I think when we do anything in tribal government, it's always about the 7 generations. What are we doing today, and how will it impact the 7 generations? Because what we do today, we want to make sure that everything is the best that it can be. And when we think about 7 generations, that is our youth, our future. They are the ones that are going to run tribal government. They are the ones that are going to run our businesses. It's our responsibility then is how we raise those children to be able to assume those responsibilities.
Planning for the future was a theme throughout the morning's speech.
6 months ago, I had the honor of being elected as your chief executive once again. Now I want to develop a plan for us to become economically self-sufficient. So today, I wish to announce some important news. This will be of interest to band members and others in the state. It is one of the boldest business moves we have ever made. Pending some final approvals, and I'll repeat that again, pending some final approvals, the Mille Band will soon own 2 major hotels in downtown St. Paul. When these transactions are finalized, the Mille Band will own almost 48%, that's almost half, of the hotel rooms in the Minnesota's capital city.
In addition to buying 2 hotels, There are plans to open a center for small business and light industry in Hinckley, and a commercial printing center on the reservation in east central Minnesota. These ventures will further diversify the economy and business interests for the band.
A corporate commissioner is responsible for business development for the tribe and also running our current business entities. So on a day-to-day basis, we're just checking the health levels of each of the businesses that we own, and then we're also looking for opportunities to chase down new businesses and start new businesses. One of the things that we've been working on is just a strategic plan to diversify the band's revenue streams, and that all came about just through a recognition that we're at a point in time where gaming may not be here forever, and what would we do without gaming? So our focus has been redirected to things where we feel we have either expertise, experience, or some sort of tribal advantage. So those are the different businesses and sectors that we're looking at. There's opportunities in greater Minnesota, there's opportunities in this region. We think the big opportunity is national. So what we want to do is we want to be in every major U.S. market, and that's the vision, that's the goal of the Corporate Commission, is to have hospitality assets in every major market in the U.S.
Nearly 1,500 band members and invited guests filled the ballroom. National Indian Gaming Association Chairman Ernie Stevens Jr. had a special gift for Chief Executive Benjamin.
On behalf of my grandmother, Maria Hinton, I present this to the Mille Lacs Band, and then we'll now put it on to Chief Executive.
I have 4 grandchildren, and when I look at those grandchildren, I think, where are they going to be when they grow up? What stories will they have to tell about their family, their lives, what they strive for? We can't really separate who we are as a people just because we're in the business environment. We've always been business people, but we've been business people with a culture, with a spiritual responsibility, with traditions and things that we have to do as people to prepare ourselves and prepare our children to move forward.
Did you know that almost all Native American peoples attach special significance to the eagle and its feathers? Images of eagles and their feathers are used on many tribal logos. To be given an eagle feather is the highest honor that can be awarded within indigenous cultures. Both bald and golden eagles are highly revered and considered sacred within American Indian traditions. They are honored with great care and shown the deepest respect. They represent honesty, truth, majesty, strength, courage, wisdom, power, and freedom. The eagle flies higher and sees better than any other bird, and it is believed to be closer to the Creator. Many dancers use eagle feathers as part of their regalia. If for any reason an eagle feather is dropped, it needs to be cleansed. Under both U.S. and Canadian law, a permit is required from government conservation authorities for anyone to possess an eagle feather legally. Native Americans acquiring bald and golden eagle feathers must use them only for traditional ceremonies or teaching purposes.
Next, Ho-Chunk Inc., the Economic Development Corporation of the Winnebago Tribe of Nebraska, employs over 1,000 people in 10 states and 4 foreign countries. Back in 1994, it had only 1 employee, visionary Lance Morgan, president and CEO of the corporation.
On this morning at the National Congress of American Indians Mid-Year Conference in Lincoln, Ho-Chunk Inc. President and CEO Lance Morgan makes a presentation on strategies for protecting and enhancing Indian commerce on reservations, a topic he knows very well. So if there's a tribe in the middle of nowhere, a small gaming operation, How do they diversify their economy?
What you have to do is look at your advantages as a tribe, and some of them are so good. You have some tax advantages, you pass your own laws, you can't be sued, you have some state tax advantages on the reservation. Now, those advantages have always existed, but the tribes haven't been structured very well to exploit them. So if you can create sort of these organic structures and figure out ways to deal with it locally, to put in place a system that minimizes some of the negatives but maximizes the positive, you have a real chance. The other thing that's out there is if you're in a rural area, some of these advantages aren't dependent upon location. Government contracting, we do stuff all over the world. We sold a satellite to the Mexican government last year. Who'd have thought that would happen, right? And so you're not limited by a geography in some of the stuff. The other thing that's going on is the states have been highly restricted to tribes. They control who you deal with. And so they can't tell a tribe what to do, and we sort of like that. And if they tried, we probably wouldn't do it. But they can tell everybody you deal with in the economic stream what to do. The internet has changed that a little bit. What it's done is jump the normal state control mechanism. So there's a whole new world emerging that's financial, that's regulatory oriented, and the states are struggling with how to control that. And there's hope now where there was none before.
The Winnebago Reservation in Nebraska is not unlike many reservations across Indian country, and the success of the nation is due to many factors, not just one.
You have to understand the problems of developing on a reservation are very, very hard. But what the Winnebago tribe did is they looked back and said, hey, these problems we face the same problems over and over again. What if we created an entity that sort of upfront dealt with those problems and gave us our best chance of success? And then we could sort of evolve. And what's happened is we're sort of a tortoise. We get a little bit smarter, we go a little bit faster, we grow, we're steady. And we've created an entity with some stability, with some institutional knowledge that allows us to learn one business and move on. Ho-Chunk Inc. started in 1994 in the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska. I was their lawyer. We had got gaming, and we had a little bit of extra money for once. Our discretionary budget was $184,000 the year before, and we were doing well in gaming, but competition was authorized in the cities. And basically, our gaming got wiped out, 90% drop a few years later. But the tribe took some money, millions of dollars, and set it up and used the money to set up Ho-Chunk Inc. And our job was, as quickly as possible, to diversify our economy away from gaming. And our first year, I was an employee, and we had $400,000 in revenue. I remember thinking that was pretty good. Last year, we had 1,400 employees, and we're in 5 other countries, and our revenues, non-gaming, were $227 million. And you have to imagine a town with 65% unemployment, 1,500 people, what dropping a sort of international corporate entity in town does for a rural place like that.
Lance, how did you get involved, or how did you get into tribal economic development?
I suppose it goes back to my youth. I could listen to my parents talking to their friends about what was happening at the tribe, and I was just sort of listening, the way a kid would. And I've been very involved in my dad's small business, and so business seemed very simple to me, and I was wondering, why would they do that? And I thought, well, if I could just somehow do something, it would make sense. When I got to college, I started studying business. I focused on economic development issues on the reservation just to study, just because it was sort of a hobby. I never thought I'd actually do it. When I went to law school, I wrote my third-year thesis on strategies for economic development on the reservation. In 1993 is when I graduated. Gaming took off in 92-ish. And so a new field was emerging called corporate Indian law, and it was like a dream come true for me.
With a background in both tribal law and business, Lance offers insight into the evolving world of tribal commerce that goes beyond gaming. He also questions the role of the federal government.
Gaming is incredible. I mentioned this, we lived in this really terrible economic system that was designed to sort of exploit from us, and it limited us. We didn't have some of the skill sets you needed even to participate in business. Then gaming came along, and it basically created economic activity and revenue and profits where none had been before. And it's wonderful, but you have to look at it as an opportunity, not an end. And the tribes realized that, hey, this gravy train might be over someday, and so we better diversify. And I think that's wise. There's nothing that we've ever had as a tribes of value that has not been taken by the political, the legal, or the economic system in some way. And why would gaming really be any different? The problem we face is that the U.S. federal court system isn't Indian at all. There's not a single Indian as a district court, a circuit court judge, or a Supreme Court judge. And so these people lack perspective. And when it comes down to it, they rule against us almost every time. And so a system that you never win isn't really our system, right? It's a system that exploits from us. And it's amazing how many rules from the economic landscape that were crafted by 9 people on the Supreme Court who know nothing about us and our challenges. And so if you're just clever and you can make an argument, then you take something from us. And so we live in a world where the entire legal system is sort of designed to exploit us. And so you're a fool if you think that's your system, and we're not fools, right? And so what we do is we strive to find ways to develop tribal law. Federal Indian law is restrictive in nature. Tribal law, where we create our own rules, our own laws, is expansive in nature. It steps on a few toes sometimes, but what's our alternative? You know, doing nothing and being the good Indian, you know, that doesn't get you anywhere.
I did an interview with someone that's older than me who was raised by grandparents. They said he had lots of oral history and stories, so I interviewed him. And one of the things I remember that he said was his grandfather said there was a time that our people lived in temples. And I didn't understand and he didn't explain, but it could be. We could have been actually in temples like the Mayan temples, or they could have been palisades that were described in Cahokia and in Lake Winnebago on the island. So I don't know how to interpret that, but those were just the words. His grandfather said that at one time in our history we lived in temples. So you can only conjecture at this point.
Due to eagle feathers having great cultural and spiritual significance to Native Americans throughout Indian country, the United States Department of Justice held 2 consultation meetings with Native nations in order to clarify its policies. It was from the feedback and written comments the DOJ drafted a new policy.
On this afternoon at the National Congress of American Indians Mid-Year Conference, a breakout session regarding the use and possession of eagle and other bird feathers was well attended by representatives from across Indian country.
Eagle feathers are important to tribes all across the country in that we honor the spirit of the eagle, and various tribes have different stories about why that's so. But in general, the eagle has interceded on our behalf with the Creator and is a messenger, and we honor those feathers as part of that role that eagle played in our cultural history. It's part of an ongoing negotiation on a new policy that is being considered. There's a over 30-year-old policy called the Morton policy that's at the Department of Interior that has been essentially says that it's how the law will be implemented is what they're saying. And what they said is that they had no intention of the law that protects eagles to keep traditional people from being able to have the religious use of their feathers. So for their own possession and for the transfer in a traditional way, a gift, they would not interfere in that process. But it's at a policy level at Department of Interior. It's called the Morton policy. It's been around 35 years.
The Martin policy is an informal one, but at the heart of the issue is the exercise of the First Amendment.
Unlike other Americans, Native Americans historically were not protected by the First Amendment in many ways. If you go back into the 19th century, their exercise of religion was prohibited. There were regulations passed in the early 20th century that were enforced till the 1930s that actually prohibited the activities of medicine men, prohibited traditional ceremonies, and for many tribes, missionaries were sent out to try to convert Indians, notwithstanding the other part of the First Amendment, which is the Establishment Clause. So that's the history here. There's an informal policy in place in the Interior Department, and has been for many years, that's supposed to protect people who are possessing these feathers and using these feathers for cultural, ceremonial, religious purposes from being prosecuted by the federal government. But about 3 years ago, notwithstanding these informal policies, there were a series of stings that took place. And I think that initially for the government, there was a disconnect there where they said, oh, well, but we don't go after people who possess these just for their own cultural purposes. And we'd say, yeah, but then why did all this happen?
We're looking at two different worldviews. We have a worldview that's pretty much centered in property, that is the United States legal system. And so for that system to think of eagle feathers and to make accommodations for the religious use of eagle feathers for tribes, they've done so in a way of thinking of them as property. And yet for our indigenous peoples, we don't think of them as property because they're a sacred gift that we don't own.
How an individual obtains eagle feathers is an issue of concern, and still another is who can legally possess them.
It is very difficult to actually get an eagle feather, and even if an individual in our tribe earns an eagle feather, we may not have an eagle feather to give them because there's a repository that's held by Fish and Wildlife, and they disperse those eagle feathers. So to our tribe it becomes, do we have access, and how do you access the eagle feathers? What is the process, and how does Fish and Wildlife divvy out those eagle feathers? Can one tribe get 25 and another tribe get none? There was an individual that talked today from one of the tribes back east that said he's been on that list for 3 years trying to receive eagle feathers for honoring. And we're a tribe that's located, we were one of the 5 original tribes of Yosemite National Park. We moved outside the park and we are actually further down in the foothills. But, you know, we don't have eagles in our area. So it is important for us to be able to at least know that we can access if we wanted to honor an elder.
Well, if an eagle were to come up to me and sit in the tree in front of me and speak to me and drop a feather for me, I would know that feather was for me, and it would be it's something that is part of our culture, our heritage. However, under the system that is currently in place, where I'm legally obligated to pick that feather up and ship it off to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Eagle Repository near Denver and put in an application for a feather. And sometime 2 to 3 years later, I may or may not get a feather, and when I get a feather, it most assuredly will not be the one that I shipped in. And so most traditional people, in fact all traditional people, don't send it. They keep it because it's what they were supposed to do.
Now there are a number of issues around, this that still need to be clarified. One of the issues you heard a lot about involved Native Americans who are not members of federally recognized tribes. They may be state recognized tribes, they may be unrecognized tribes, but they have a traditional culture and they use these items and have for a long time. The government is essentially taking the position that legally they only have a trust relationship to federally recognized tribes, and that's as far as they're going to go. An interpretation that is a fairly narrow interpretation of history and case law but it is the interpretation that they seem to be following.
I'm really honored to be able to work on this, and for my family, for my tribe, for Indian country as a whole. It's important that we do these things that help preserve our ability to pass our heritage on to those coming generations.
The Department of Justice issued their policy decision in October of 2012, allowing for possession of eagle feathers by members of federally recognized tribes. It can be viewed at www.justice.gov/tribal.
For more information about Native Report or the stories we've covered, look for us at nativereport.org and on Facebook. Thank you for spending this time with your friends and neighbors here on Native Report. I'm Stacy Thunder. We'll see you next time.
Stacy Thunder is a member of and legal counsel for the Red Lake Nation, and Tad Johnson is a member of the Boys Fort Band of Chippewa and is chair for the American Indian Studies Department on the campus of the University of Minnesota Duluth. Production of Native Report is made possible by grants from the Shakopee-Mdewakanton Sioux Community, the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, and the Blandin Foundation.